Good morning, this is Lucky Lynx, and I haven't done a video for you in a while, so I'm going to show you guys something that's really, really advanced, because every once in a while it's nice to see something very unusual, and this is a very unusual thing. There are a lot of things that I do with clients and that I have done and learned to do over the years that I do not put out there on the videos simply because they're way too advanced. But there are certain things that maybe it's interesting or it would be good for you to know that are possible, that can happen, so that you can either aim for learning to do it, or you can find someone who's really skilled in it who can help you to figure these things out. I'm going to use a past, present, and future here specifically for this concept, which is about shadow work. Let's simplify the concept, because I don't want to get too complicated in an introduction to the concept. For those of you who have never done shadow work, let's say shadow work is essentially the dark meaning of the cards. Each card has a light meaning and a dark meaning. Each one. So, if you know what you're doing, and you have some experience, and you have the capacity to be able to detach enough to see what's really going on, you can use the dark meanings of the cards to see what keeps you bound, what limits you, and then use them to free up new options. So for example, I'm going to use an example here of a woman who is in a relationship with a man who does not appreciate her, nor is he faithful to her, nor is he wishing the best from her. Now, we're not going to look at the past, present, future here in terms of what's necessarily coming. We're going to look at the shadow part, how she ended up in this, and what the dark part of this relationship satisfies for her. If she can see what the dark part of her persona or her personality, or the dark part of her mind is doing here, and becomes aware of it, she may be able to let it go and not do it again. So in the case of this example, we can look at, how what was the dark part of her personality that drew him to him in the past to begin with, what it's doing to her now, and where it's likely to go in the future if she continues with it, and then what that's going to create. And then I can look at it a little further then, should I choose, to see what options are there. What drew her to him in the past. Okay, this is the Jack of Hearts, but it actually ended up upside down, which is interesting because a lot of people will suggest that that means the shadow side of things. So there's a child in here, somewhere in here, or a childish impulse, or something that's coming from a childish place. 4 is in the middle, and that's limited or limited values, and then the future would be the 10 of diamonds. If I look at the shadow side of each one of these, not the light side, the shadow one of these, there's a child in here or a childish impulse that was crushed, a person coming at it from a childish, wanting a parent, wanting to be treated like a child, wanting to be held down. So be wanting to put in her place as a child and held down. What that gives her, or would give her in the future, is the security of knowing that she doesn't have to make any decisions, or grow up, or take any responsibility. What the dark outcomes of this would be is this childish part of her that actually wants to express itself and be creative will be held in place and be molded to his values. As she is molded to his values, she gets something that she wants out of that. So then we would ask, what does she want out of that? To not be responsible for her own choices, and to give up responsibility for her own choices, but to give them over to him. And to be ruled by someone else. if she continues to do this, what will happen to her? That's the 8. She will find herself in a situation very similar to the one that she had when she was a child that started all of this. So what I'm feeling in this particular case is she's actually becoming aware of these things, and she actually wants to make a new life for herself. That's the other side. That's the light side of it. So I don't want this to get really dark so that you guys go, whoa, that's screwed up. But there is an awareness in her, so actually what's forcing itself out in the cards is showing me that there's a light part emerging. That precocious, creative part of her has been limited, and she'd like to find her own way and her own fortune. That's where the light part's going. But if we look at the dark part, she decided to bind herself to something that was very familiar and someone else's values, because it gave her the power of being like a child and not having to be responsible for her own decisions, her own actions, and her own outcomes. And then she could blame someone else for it, and then have the satisfaction of going, I don't have to do that. That's not my fault. I didn't have to do what I really wanted to do, which feels like something very, very creative. So somewhere in there, giving up that creative impulse, and it actually feels like art. By having someone else crush it and mold her, she doesn't have to take the risk or the security risks, and then she doesn't have to do that and face her fears about security in relation to being creative and being who she really is. And she can live by his values, and she never has to take a risk. And she never has to be responsible for that part of herself that was true, that needed to be cultivated and protected and defended in a world that didn't value or appears not to value those particular gifts, which are indeed truly valuable. The good news is, in this case and as this example is, she's deciding she wants a new family, a new connection, and she's likely to move that way. So some part of her is waking up to that shadow and becoming aware of it so that she can release it. But the shadow shows you, the dark parts show you what your darker motivations are. And if you're not aware of them, you will never, ever, ever be able to get rid of them. They'll just continue to run under the surface like this weird machine. So this is a very, very, very advanced concept, but one that maybe you should know and would be interesting for a lot of you to know is out there. And it's very easy to go wrong with these, especially when you're looking at yourself. And if you're just starting out, I wouldn't try to do this yourself, because you could lead yourself down a real rabbit hole. But, like I said, for the sake of curiosity, for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of knowing that it's out there, you could actually look at what the motivations are for blocks that keep coming up for people again and again and again and again and again in their life, and start to look at a deep, deep shadow aspect of it. And then what it does usually is it gives you a tremendous insight into what's doing it. Now you could take it further from that, and I usually would. Okay, now I know this is what's going on. Where did it come from? Her shadow. Why is it there? There's an excitement to being held down. What will it lead her to? Uncertainty in her action. And then I would keep looking deeper and trying to figure out what might come to light to help her. But the good news is, in this particular case, it looks like she's starting to come to light herself. So there's hope for her to be able to release it and actually find some good fortune. So, what on the surface I'm going to tell you, and this is the other side that's really kind of spooky, is that in the original case, it looks like she's got everything going for her. She has an awful lot of resources and an awful lot of money with this particular person. And she is living a life that many people look like they would really want to live. But under the surface, she is feeling completely squashed and has put herself in someone else's values and under someone else's holding them down. And the price that she paid for what everyone else appears to be what they would want. Lots of money, lots of resources, lots of things. She is stuck in a very, very precarious place. And the real part of her that's really trying to get out is dying. That's shadow work. I'm Lucky Lynx. I hope this concept illuminates something and gives you a sense that there's a lot more going on in the world than we even know. And sometimes our motivations and why we do things aren't very clear. And sometimes when we look at the cards simply as past, present, and future, all we get is a cursory or very superficial understanding of what's going on. But there is more. There's always more. And you can go deeper if you know what you're doing. So be very, very careful with this. Know that it's out there. And in time, maybe those of you who have experience with it, I think that's really cool that you've learned it and are able to use it. For those of you who don't, know that it's out there, and there is a lot more to these than simply past, present, and future. And there is a lot more that you can do with clients than just the superficial, this is what's coming your way and this is where you've come from. But you also have to have a client who's receptive. And in a lot of cases, they may not be. That's not what they want. So know what a client wants. Don't try to force this stuff on them ever, especially if you don't have any experience doing it. And the best advice I can give is know yourself truly first before you try to help other people to see those darker parts of themselves. I'm Lucky Lynx, and always wishing you success and good fortune in all that you do. The links below for donations if you want to help keep this going, or to call me and get a reading, which is even better. And I'm putting all those things in the thing below. If you have any questions, as always, put them in the thing below. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you want to get a reading, if you want to get a shadow reading, I've been doing these for a very, very long time, and I have a very deep background not only in this, but in the mind sciences and hypnosis. I have a great deal of experience doing this kind of thing. So if you want to get a reading like that, give me a call or an email, and we'll set something up. As always, one more time, wishing you success and good fortune in all that you do.